And does the Mendelssohn have any influence on the instrumentation on your piece?
Yes, of course, yes. Yeah, it was the moment I wanted to write a concerto, in fact. And when the announcement came with, with 4 possibilities.
Yes. Yeah.
So I said, this is chamber music and also a concerto. So
you combine the two together?
Yeah. And I listened to Mendelssohn's piece a lot, and I let it
wash over you?
Yeah. And I decided to write something related to the impression of how this music and other musics let in me.
Right.
So you will see there are a lot of moments and styles, but the most important is Mendelssohn impression.
Right.
So this is why the work is called Je trouve les Histoires. So I have found these musics.
And in what ways do they influence your own music? How do they filter through into your own piece?
So I knew that Mendelssohn wrote it at 14, and it's a very energetic work for 14 years old. And I imagined how this child did it and what it meant for him, for a child, I mean. And I tried to give this feeling of energy.
Youthful energy.
Yeah. I hope I will be able to.
And is this piece typical of your music now?
No.
In what way?
It's a problem with my music because a lot of performers say my works are very different. So I don't know if I would find in my list of works something like this one. So I don't know what to say. So
right.
It's not.
Well, I can ask you another question now.
So I'm building now my style. So
right. And which composers do you find have influenced you in recent years? Or who do you feel was a big influence?
So I don't know if there are influences. I like many composers. I like very much the music by Vieru and Stroie. These are my Romanian favorites.
Right.
And I like very much Bergio. So you mean the 20th century?
Well,
or
anybody,
no.
anything, anybody, any
Oh,
composer really,
okay.
you still have an influence on.
So I like Brahms a lot because it's complex and intelligent and also very close to people.
Yeah.
And Bach a lot.
Right.
For his everything.
Sheer invention.
Yeah.
And is there anything you could tell us about this piece that for us to listen out for that might help on a first hearing?
Ooh. Don't expect something. Be free, be open.
Be open, okay. Good. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Drew. So your piece is called Nocturne with Cloudscape, and I kind of know that piece already because I know you already. So just tell us a little bit about the title and how the piece came about.
Well, I consulted Anna's invitation quite in detailed way, and I thought, yes, I'll try and think of a picture which I will mentally have in my mind while composing. And I looked at the instrumentation, and I did listen indeed to the Mendelssohn, although for me I was far more thinking of the more famous piece by Mendelssohn, which he wrote about 2 years later, which is the Octet, which is an extraordinarily passionate piece.
It's a masterpiece, isn't it?
It is, and I thought I would try and replicate the intensity of that piece and its youthful invention, which is prodigious. Of course, one doesn't have the same colours involved. Coloristically, I regarded the piece as a challenge. I wanted to find many different ways to orchestrate my ideas. Of course, we have the unanimity of string sound and the piano, so you have to do it in different ways. You can't use different instrumental colours. You try different combinations of the bass and the treble, of the middle and the piano, and sonorities. I thought that to write a concerto-modelled piece would be challenging and difficult. It's a very short piece, so really to have room for cadenzas and so on, and as in the Mendelssohn where you have extended passages for the piano and violin together, I thought this was not a piece of sufficient dimensions to allow for that. And as I've mentioned before, I was also worried by the fact that in general you have a concerto and you have a solo string instrument, and there's a contrast between the sonority of the solo instrument and that of the tutti, which gives you a direct sonorous contrast to work with. And I was thinking, how would this work if I was going to try to do it in this piece where actually it's only solo instruments and the quintet accompanying? So I decided I would not do that. I would rather think of a kind of concertante style, a sort of concerto grosso approach to the instrumentation. So yes, the piano and the solo violin have the most difficult material, but they do not stand apart in the way that a romantic or classical concerto would have them do so.
Right. Was it a difficult piece to write? Or?
Yes, I always find difficult in starting a piece. Well, not always. Sometimes you get a gift and you think you can go with this. But generally speaking, I find it's difficult to get the initial material which you believe in sufficiently to dwell on. Generally speaking, I have a nugget, say a few chords, which have a lot of potential. And you think, I must have a lot of potential. I must be able to develop in different ways from this minimal material. But in this particular instance, thinking again of the brief, really, thinking also about the kind of audience it would be perhaps listened to by, with all the Mendelssohn involved and so on, I did try to simplify. I tend to be a rather complicated composer, and I get into complex textures very easily, probably too much so. So I made a really strenuous attempt to be simple, and the piece has therefore far slower tempi for a lot of the time than is general in my music, and the tonality is quite marked, or modal anyway, rather than in a free dissonance or any other kind of style, although it does have its moments. So that marks it apart from my other pieces, although I must say my direction recently has been an increasing desire to find a more approachable style without compromise.
You mean more approachable for the musicians and the audience?
Indeed, because I've had problems with the power to execute what I want. I used to write music with many different time signatures and so on, and I found this actually was very disheartening in a way, because it limited the player's ability to realise it as I was hoping to hear it. So I decided to try and simplify on that ground to start with, as far as time signatures are concerned, as much of as possible is in common time. So, but my desire nowadays is to try and find ideas which are new, but nevertheless within the area of psychological approachability for the majority of people. And I find this actually very hard to manage, because I do feel very worried about falling into the trap of cliché and pastiche. So I feel that once material is strong enough and the logic of development in your piece is strong enough, you can forget about that, because I think the logic of development will ensure that you remain within the world you're creating. And that should hopefully contain... indeed. So there we are. But the story involved and the picture element, I have to say, came a bit later.
Right.
Actually, it's absolute music, but then I thought of the picture and the story as a kind of ancillary.
Is it a way into the piece for the listener?
It is, because definitely the mood is one of a troubled serenity at the beginning, and then there is the mounting excitement, which you could say is that of the story of the ship taking off from the sea, which in Gustave Doré's engraving is a very calm proceeding, it seems, but in my score it's not so calm. I imagine the ship making all sorts of groanings and noises, and it takes off rather like a space rocket rather than an ordinary ship. So there's this motoric rhythm which comes in halfway through, which would not be appropriate to the age of sea-going vessels with driven by the wind. It's like some engine starting up. But this was purely for musical reasons. I wanted to feel some subliminal pulse coming in. Quite a lot of the music then gets quite busy, but it still has to remain quite quiet, which is quite a feat, I've discovered, to attain in the balance and general busyness of the textures.
Okay, that's very
Okay,
helpful.
thank you.